It is time to spread the word of God. And more importantly, get better at building. You see, my main strength in this video game is building. I suck at PvP, I'm okay at redstoning, but building is my real strength. The problem is I haven't really gone into building large structures until very recently, and I've exclusively been building Gothic cathedrals. I think they're a really good way to learn about basic building concepts, and they will also shove you out of your comfort zone. You will be building interiors diagonally and in ways that should 100% be illegalized. This video is less of a tutorial about how to build a cathedral and more propaganda to get you started. Partly because a block-by-block tutorial will take around my entire lifespan, and partly because I think the best way for you to learn is for you to do it yourself. The first cathedral I ever did was small in comparison. It taught me about a lot of things, but the first two things I'm going to talk about are proportions and composition. Proportion, at least in this context, refers to how different sizes affect each other, as well as the player's perspective. Composition refers to how different elements of a build are arranged in order to make it look appealing. I'll give some examples of my builds as well, so that I'm not just reading out Oxford Dictionary. Let's talk about proportion first and how it is used to attempt to simulate heaven on earth. It is the free trial experience of dying a virtuous soul and ascending to meet God. Too bad I belong in hell. This experience is conveyed by an advanced architectural technique known as building everything really high. The higher the ceiling, the smaller you feel, and from your perspective, it just looks like everything around you is a lot larger. By using proportion, not only can you make your builds more impressive, you can also show the insignificance of human life. And in regards to composition, the most important lesson I've learned is that most of this build is actually copy and paste. If you look at a standard Gothic cathedral, you'll realize that there's only 3 parts of it that are truly unique. Granted, you're still going to get carpal tunnel when you build them, but you don't need to break your fingers trying to detail the entire building. Unless you don't have World Edit or you don't know how to use the clone command, in which case, get World Edit. You're doing yourself a favor. But it shows how having repetitive parts in your build allows the more unique sections of it to stand out a lot more. Fun fact, did you know the cathedral that I based this build off of? The left tower is very slightly wider than the right tower. This fact imparts constant pain onto me, which is why I must pass it on to my audience. The second cathedral I built taught me about scale, shapes, and perspective. When it comes to structures as detailed as Gothic cathedrals, bigger is better. Building at a larger scale is like rendering an image at a higher resolution. You get to have more detail and your builds can get a lot more intricate. And because I was building at such a large scale, I had a lot more freedom to define a lot more shapes. This is incredibly helpful if you take into account that Gothic cathedrals have shapes that do not exist in Minecraft. For example, circles or the inside of a Venn diagram. I was forced to translate non-square shapes into a square space. Learning to define these types of shapes in my cathedrals really allows me to make use of them in my other builds. Examples of other builds pending. Perspective plays a very unique role, I think, in mega builds. First of all, mega builds are mega. My intelligence scares even myself sometimes. But second of all, because they're so big and because you'll always be viewing them from below, the proportion of the build ties in closely with the perspective of which you're looking at it from. For example, the roofs of the 2 towers need to be disproportionately large, otherwise they will simply get eaten by the bulk of the church when viewing them from below, which is where most people will view them because people can't fly. In addition, understanding the perspective of the player and knowing where the player is going to be looking at your build from allows you to use certain techniques to define those intricate details, like for example using multiple layers of detail to define shapes that otherwise would be very difficult to do. You can also make use of blocks like walls or wither skulls to carve out shapes with negative space. I think one thing that cathedrals teach you to do as well is how to break down very detailed builds. Like my cathedral over here, it looks like it has a lot of detail, and it I guess it does, but if you really take the time to break it down, you'll notice that it's basically just this. By ignoring the vast majority of the details in the build, you're able to break down the general shape of the build and get a better idea of how you're going to go about building such a large structure without getting too overwhelmed by the details. And if we want to simplify it even further, we have this cross section. If we take a look at it side by side, we can see that compared to the main build, it's essentially the same thing except simplified down as much as possible so that we can see the core structure and understand the foundation of the build. And as for the parts of the cathedral that stand out, like the side here is just that cross section over there, rotated sideways and extended outwards a little bit. And then for the towers, it is you just take the foundation and extend it all the way to the top. So you get these two giant rectangles on top. And then the back of the cathedral is the most complicated one. Right now I show it with cylinders because this is the most simple way. This isn't completely accurate to how cathedrals are usually built. I'll post the floor plan on the screen. The curves aren't really perfectly circular, but I just did this because it'd be a lot more simpler to build this cathedral because I was going for a bit more like Minecraft style than a traditional realistic style. Special thanks to the players Creeper5777 and Vahan for getting me into building Gothic cathedrals and putting up with all my questions about them. I know it's been a long while since I uploaded, but I do have a lot of video ideas and hopefully I have more content on the way. So if you're interested in that, do subscribe. Alright, bye! Bye!